All right, Vish, welcome to the Orc 4 podcast, man. How's it going?
Greebos. It's going pretty well, man. How are you doing?
Greebos. It's all good, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. You are an old-time orc, so I already gave you a brief intro like I do all the others, but I want to give you a chance to sort of introduce yourself, if you will, to the listeners.
Well, I am Vishakt. At least that's how I think of myself nowadays. People maybe see my orc, his brother Tarshakt, more often, but he's old school. He's simple, spearman, archer, likes killing people, likes defending our area, and it's kind of how I play the game. I'm more into the PvP side and the RP side than the PvM side. Most characters, people that play the game, would be surprised at how few dungeons I've actually been in, even after 4 or 5 years of Outlands.
Yeah, and so for the listener, Vish is that when I say old time orc, I mean the last in the 90s, right? You're not even in this. You're not even in this. Not even the 2000s orc. You're a 90s orc. Vish, if you don't mind, can you walk through memory lane with me? All right, if you will, and talk to me about when you first heard the words Ultima Online. Do you remember that?
I do. So, for me, that was back when I had started my career and I was at work, and a couple of my buddies were talking, and I didn't even know they played video games, and one of them just started talking about some crazy game that had come out that he had picked up, and he wanted some people to play with him. So a couple of us got the game, and this was back in '98, which everybody now affectionately, I believe, calls the Dreadlord days. And everybody has good stories of being a dreadlord, but our stories from back then were of pure incompetence. They were hilarious. I mean, we got that game not really understanding what it was, because UO being the first real MMORPG, we didn't know what we were walking into. But there was no... The thing that made it difficult was, you couldn't look anything up. There was no strategy on the website. The book was extremely basic.
Yeah.
So you didn't even know the mechanics. Back then, if you walked out of town and you got paralyzed, which you usually did within 2 screens, you couldn't break it, so you were dead. And we would just sit.
Man, no, I was just gonna say, Vish, and I always gripe about. I sound like a broken record sometimes, but there's something amazing about not knowing everything. That's the adventure, man. Like, again, I don't play D&D, but I've played games similar to it. If you knew what was going to happen and all the mechanics and every function of the game, then what's the point? I mean, there's a little bit of an allure there, if you will, with not knowing everything.
I agree. And I mean, we would literally have conversations at work like, you can eat, and other people would overhear our conversations about killing somebody, and people thought we were insane, but it was an exciting time to play, even if... Actually, it's funny, we've gone full circle. Back then, all I could do is really find a crappy bassinet helm and run around, and that's now where the orcs start. Slap you in a bassinet and tell you to get moving.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a good time. I mean, the rules don't compare at all, but I think we kind of ran around for a lot. I remember the first time, I will say this, the first time I made it, we were based out of Vesper. The first time I made it to Minnock, we felt like it was a major accomplishment, and that's like a 2-minute run. But over time, some of the rules changed, and we learned what was going on, how to survive a little better, and we formed a guild. We actually got a house spot right next to the Vesper Ironwood Inn, and we called it the Vesper Militia. 'Cause we didn't really RP. We didn't know what that was.
Right.
But we hung out there, and we did our thing. And one of our guys actually made and sold clothes and wrote books, and we used to laugh at him all the time. But again, it showed that you could do that. and you could do whatever you wanted. Your character could be named what it wanted. You could act the way he wanted. We really enjoyed that freedom. Um, we start back in those days as well. Your house wasn't secure at all. So if you had a house and you had a key, you had best be real careful with that key because somebody got your key, they got your house.
You know,
So a lot of the
no, Vish, sorry to, but you said something that to me that's pretty critical, and it's that you can be whatever you wanted, and there's pros and cons to everything. Nothing is truly black and white in this world. Very few things are anyway. But when you log on to Outlands now, if you're a new time player, if it's your first day, you go to a new player channel in Discord and you ask for advice. And what do they give you? An exact how to, what build, specific points, exactly where to farm. Go here, do this animal, farm this. You know, if you want to raise taming, do it here to level 70. Hop over here to 75. This is how you get. It's just, it's what's there's no discovery there. You know, you don't learn any of this in a new world because it's already been mapped out for you. And to me, that robs out so much of the fun because exploring and learning these things are the fun part. Like you were saying with your buddies, finding out you can eat. You mean that's hilarious, but I'm sure you were like, what the hell, you can eat,
we didn't fathom they would put that in a game. And you're right, 100%. The game now is more geared towards those of us that have played for way too long and we know everything. So to get people to go like to the new server, you want to ramp them up quickly. But there is something you lose doing that. And those times, as bumbling and stupid as we were, those make some of the best memories, to be honest. And that's one thing I love about being at work is we encourage people to just come to the fort. I mean, I know people do train a lot in Outlands before they come, but just run to the fort, brand new, naked. We'll set you up, get you going. People will say they don't think they can PvP or PvM because they don't have the skill set yet, but just run out and do it anyway.
Right.
It makes for good times.
Yeah, and I remember when I first logged into Outlands, I would farm the forest next to wolves and shit in the forest, and dude, that farming was more fun than any level 3 dungeon boss runs or whatever the crap I do now. So it's the adventure that we seek. But okay, so you started off in Vesper. You're a human at this point.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
actually. Being the unimaginative person that I was, my name was Boromir because I just watched Lord of the Rings.
Oh no, you're one of those guys with the Lord of the Rings.
I was one of
names.
those. I was one of those guys.
You at least you weren't Legolas or whatever that guy. Oh my god, how many variations of that? But anyways, Boromir.
So Boromir, the terrible blacksmith, was running around, and one day, the Shard. I was on Catskills. They had opened up moon gates at the bank, and I was just curious what it was and. With my, before I was an orc, I just hopped it immediately, wanted to know what was in it. And they had set up some kind of a tour. So it took you to interesting parts around the game, just that you probably couldn't travel to otherwise. So probably the 4th or 5th stop went to the U-Orc Fort. And when I popped out of there, it was utter chaos. I was so lost. I was so confused. The orc NPCs I understood. And there were other orcs that I also had thought were NPCs, but it turned out they were not. And they were demanding tribute from people. They were killing some people and not others. And back in those days, if a body hit the floor, everybody surrounded it and looted it till it was dry.
Yeah.
That's just how you survived. But when you did that by that fort, you were enraging those people, and they were chasing you all over the planet, killing you, screaming gibberish. And I was immediately intrigued and hooked.
Yeah.
That was not the Bloodrock clan, actually. That was the Shadow clan.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah, it's a sister clan of ours.
Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of their members today. And so that was an interesting introduction. And eventually I made an orc. I wasn't fully into it. When Siege Perilous started, way later, that's when it kind of got me. So
what year was that? What year did the Siege come out?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I want to say it was like around 2000, 1999 maybe, or it's hard to say, but it was the early dates too. And there you could kill people. So one of the frustrating parts on Catskills was trying to avoid murder counts and getting into stat loss and it seemed like it was a lot harder regain your stats when you lost, and there were whole players that were there to try and get us into stat loss and then kill us. So moving to Siege, it took off all of those limitations. Now we could just murder until our heart was content. Um, but instead of rolling an orc on there, I rolled an undead, and I played that for a few years. So I'll glaze over that, but that was a really really fun time. We hung out with orcs a lot. There was a Wistwood Shire.
Hmm.
We attacked them actually so mercilessly that that was the first time I got devious. I actually used to back then disguise kits could be used by anybody, and we would raid them so often and so hard. We'd murder them all, and they'd be hiding in their big hut there. That I started carrying around an all gray kit, and when the rest of the group would run off there, I would change my clothes and use the disguise kit, and then show up and defend them. Not every time, but we had crossed the line, with our how much we were. These were people that we supposedly liked, and we were really brutalizing them.
Yeah, yeah.
So nobody ever actually knew that except for their guild leader and one other person, and because they didn't like murderers, but when they'd see me coming, they would open the doors, and then I would run in and help them fight their way out.
You and one thing that's I always bring up in what's interesting about these interactions back then was that you didn't really have voice chat at the time, right? Did you in 2000? It wasn't prevalent like it is today.
We used ICQ, so you got those little uh-ohs all the time. Especially once you got in the RP scene, you'd have so many names. I mean, that thing would be lit up. And I know there's probably people listening now that had way more people than I did. But it was
Like
exciting.
people messaging you and stuff or what? Because
Oh,
I
yeah.
never used
Yes.
ICQ. I never used it.
Constantly. It was the first IM I knew of, and I don't think there were group chats. I don't remember, but it seems like that, it was just nonstop. But that was the only way you could talk. There was no party chat, and you just spoke in game, which to a degree I really like, and it does help with RP and immersion.
It does,
But
yeah. There's like everything is good and bad, but it does hinder you in some sense. But I think it bolsters RP wise.
oh, agreed. And on Siege, I was known for getting bored and deleting my characters, which you had a one character limit, so that was probably not the best idea. But I deleted my guys 6 or 7 times and would remake, and I eventually was in Undead a couple times. I was in a group that dealt with the Drow. There was a strong Drow group back then. There was a Safe Haven, which it could be a series of several podcasts. It was a player-run town they had set up. Supposedly it would be a safe haven for everybody, reds and blues. And as you can imagine, it was a non-stop massacre. Like they had guards. They were kind of like the orcs, and then just not as cool. But then when Siege ended, when Publish 16 came out, we all fled the regular servers. The changes just didn't seem fun. They seemed strange. It was going to item based to like compete with WoW or something. Before that, the unique thing about UO was just skill. It was mostly skill based.
Right.
The weapons were important, of course, but you didn't have the special abilities, so they were less important. But so we moved over to Angel Island, and for a long time I was running the undead there with a lady named Amira, Zanib, I think, and she was out of Europe somewhere, and we bumped into some orcs, and after I played that for a while, I went ahead and switched and made it orc. That was actually where Vishakt was born, and that was probably 2003 or 2004.
Okay.
And at the time, I still hadn't heard of Bloodrock actually, but Shadow Clan was in decline. They, in fact, our group on that server, they wouldn't let us use the Shadow Clan name, so we were known as the Broken Tusk Horde. And actually, one of my favorite things I've ever done was a buddy of mine, and in that server he was named Ryken. I've already forgot the original name I knew him as. But there they do kind of something that we do a little bit in Bloodrock today, and there was a shadow quest. You couldn't be a grunt until you went on a quest that a higher ranked person gave you. And for some reason, instead of giving me something simple, he gave me 5 tasks, 2 of which were relatively easy, but 3 were near impossible. And having nothing better to do, they killed me. They gave me a dagger and 10 bandages and kicked me out the door. And I just kept going to do it. And it took me about 5 weeks, and I played constantly. But I had to kill people and make a shrine. I had to kill people on a certain level of shame in the mage area. I had to get people to blow themselves up with explosion boxes, which I had to get. And I couldn't go back to the fort. I couldn't use it. We didn't use the bank anyway, but I couldn't do that. Uh, but I'll say that even though I was incredibly frustrated at time during those stretches, it ended up being, it changed the game once again for me. Like doing all that stuff, kind of limiting myself intentionally and role playing, and then actually succeeding. It was
Right.
amazing. And so then I
I
was
always
hooked.
have like this. I have this story I want to share with you. I think it's similar. It's not UO, but one of my favorite games of all time is Final Fantasy Tactics, right? And I remember me and my brother fell in love with the game at the same. We rented it from Blockbuster. This is how long ago this was. We rented it for a few days, and we became instantly obsessed. We stayed up all night. We're gonna beat this game. And there's the first battle scene that you have, and I don't. Did you ever play Tactics by any chance?
No, I do know what you're talking about, though.
Okay, so in Tactics, it's basically a square based, like a grid based battle system where you move 3 tiles up. A ranger can
Hmm.
move 5, or a knight would move 1, or whatever, right? But anyways, before you fight, you set up your troops, and it gives you the 2 heroes that you fight with automatically, the 2 or 3 heroes, right? And you get 4 more. But to get to the extra heroes, you have to hit right or left bumper. And we were like in 4th grade when this game came out, or 3rd grade, and we didn't know that. So we didn't know you can get additional troops. So I say all that to say that for the 5-day rental that we had, we spent all 5 days trying to fight and beat the first map with just the heroes that are automatically granted to you, even though you're supposed to get 4 additional heroes, right? And
Hmm.
so that became, and we talk about it to this day. It was very fun trying to, because we knew every step of we knew we had to parry this first attack. If we didn't, we'd restart automatically because we're not going to beat it, and we did it for 4 or 5 days straight until we eventually beat it. And it's not the point of the game, and it was a stupid thing to do, of course, but in hindsight, challenging ourselves, even though we did it unknowingly, right? Challenging ourselves to complete that was the most fun we've had in the
Yeah,
entire game.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. And now you've played the game in a way nobody else has, really.
Right, and it's a way now. Granted, that wasn't something we decided to do, right? But in the end, we did it. And looking back on it, it was a very fun thing because it was super challenging. It made the game way more challenging for us, and it became something that was memorable and an adventure, if you will.
Yeah, I just think it adds a lot. Any game you play that way, it's fun to limit yourself and move forward like that.
Yeah. So you do the
And
so
actually,
I'm guessing so
I'm
you
remembering
completed your task, right? You completed them.
I completed them. I was moved to grunt, and actually, I'm remembering, like you said at the start, I'm an old orc. I think I had the shard wrong. I've been on so many shards, especially once I joined the orcs. I think we were on UO's second age at this point, and so I got bumped to grunt, but I was gone from the fort for so long, um, and it was kind of a newish group that activity was waning. So when I got back, there was nobody really around. It was kind of depressing. But somehow they had managed to piss off this other orc clan, which of course happens to be the Bloodrock clan. And so sometimes I'd be sitting around the fort and a gate would open up, and an orc who at the time severely irritated me by the name of Nerul and his guys would pop out and they would murder us because there was so many of them. And I kept thinking, I mean, they would brutalize us. They only seemed to come when they had numbers. I had no idea where they were coming from. So I took it upon myself to find them. And I started searching, and eventually I found their fort. And generally, it always led to my death, but I'd rush in there alone and fight them over and over. And at one point, uh, I believe he was the chieftain at the time. He's the guy who brought me in, was Krararug, and he was a very great orc character in my opinion. And at some point, I was fighting him one on one for forever, like literally from their fort back to my fort as I did a slow retreat. And I don't know how, but he reached out to me and recruited me, which at the time, I thought I would have to delete my character, things of that nature. We had strict rules about that kind of stuff, but he was like, no, bring him over. I mean, your group is dead. And he was right. At the time, it was pretty much me. So from that point, I
So
switched my boots to
this wasn't
red.
Shadow. This was a sect of Shadow Clan at the time.
Yes.
Okay, so you'd still call yourself a Shadow Clan orc at this time.
Yeah. Well, we had to call ourselves Broken Tusk Horde because Shadow Clan was very strict with its rules, very strict, and until certain members of leadership would join, we weren't allowed to use the name.
Okay,
Um,
okay. So those original leaders were inactive at that point, so they weren't even there
yeah,
anymore. So
almost yes. It was fall. It was the glory days were over for that group. Um, and really, to me at the time, it seemed like they were all fading, but that turned out to be very untrue. Um, so at that point, I moved over. I switched. I put on the boots, and it wasn't long before they put me in charge of the training hut because we used to, much like our little snot hut now, but and you'll get into that in a different podcast. But equipment was handled way differently then, and the trust, because again, house looting was literally a very fun and prevalent way for people to play the game. So you also had to be cautious with your security a lot. Um, but I played there for a while, and then and then our activity died as well. So it wasn't long before I found myself the only Bloodrock orc on as well. And I kept playing, and even I was fading. But then suddenly, a new house appeared on our land, and then another house, and they were called the Boulder Fist Orcs, and they decided our fort was their fort. And and this is probably true of all UO players, maybe all players in every game. Definitely true of orcs. What we need for activity is just activity. We love when something's going on, and
yeah,
it brings it out. So this guy was going around killing, uh, like Grak, or not Grak. I'm old now. One of our older elder players who like to chop trees and stuff. And so I just started logging on and hunting them constantly. And he was posting, mocking us in the forum, so I would mock him back with similar forum posts. And more orcs started logging on, and more orcs started logging on. And eventually, we were getting about 25 people on Monday nights, and they ended up making me the Clear Goth. And for a long time, we ran that server. Like, I looked it up. We called it. We had a different name. It wasn't Slaughter Moon. It was like Marauder Mondays or something, but it was a similar concept. And I'd say it was a little softer touch than we started here. It was a lot of like roadblocks but we would definitely kill you. And but that orc, by the way, that I got into that battle with, that ran Boulder Fist, and I'm gonna butcher his name now. I have to say it. Was Ol Urga. Turns out he's a fantastic role playing orc, but
yeah, and
he
actually, he's due for the podcast. Actually, so he'll be in the next few episodes. So I'm gonna ask him about those days, man, when you were
let's see if he
terrorizing them.
remembers.
Yeah,
He inadvertently got us going again, and but I told you how I was before on Siege and everything. So once we were smooth, once we had a ton of orcs, uh, I start to think I want to try to do something a little different, and so we had another Clear Goth comp, and another person took over, and that's one thing I love about the orcs is that activity is the number one determiner maybe in your rank, not the number one, but it's key. I've been in some other groups where the person who founds it or the person who is in charge, they don't ever want to let it go. They like I guess, prestige, if there is any, but
yeah. In our
they think,
little world, there is, man. Unfortunately, there's some people
yeah,
who hold on to power when they're not supposed to, and it's sort of strange, right? Because to me, leadership is supposed to be like the people who, like George Washington, right after the Civil War, he could have made himself the king of the United States. No one would have batted an eye, but he elected to go and limit his power and for the greater good. And I feel like, in a much smaller sense for us, that's what leadership should be, right? If you're active, if you're playing, and you can produce the content, right? If you can produce the activity, then do it,
Yeah.
and do that for the greater good. But if it's just not your time to do it, it's not your time, and that's what I love about our guild, Vish, is that we have change of leadership pretty regularly, with the exception of course, Barktog, who reigned over Outlands for a few years, but that was a long stretch. But it's usually goes to the active, more willing and at the time powerful orc.
Right, and that keeps us strong. And again, I am an old orc, and it's funny because to me, the orcs from the last 4 or 5 years are new. I mean, I'll just like take you for example, this podcast and things you're doing in game. I love seeing people. I kind of disappear for short stretches, and I love when I come back and there's another name that clearly is in. Clearly, they're running things. They're getting respect from the other old orcs, and so I know immediately they're a quality person. And I love that our guild functions like that.
Yeah, yeah, and so I got a couple questions for you. So, were you the were you the last Shadow Clan orc? Or are you aware of others after that on that server, or was it dead after you left it?
It died there, but I couldn't say if they didn't try somewhere else. I wouldn't know. I mean, there was experiments with maybe other games, and the forums were up for a long time, but they just weren't playing. As far as the UO orc was, that was probably the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, there was a cursed keep event on Siege. The orcs did where they had bought a big old, was keep the biggest thing, or a castle? I guess it was a castle. But,
yeah, castle's the biggest thing. I think 16 by 16 or whatever.
And so they invite all RP guilds once a month to come and fight for it. And whoever has the most people alive inside at the end of the hour would get it. They would co-own you for the 3 weeks or whatever. And
that's a really cool idea. Yeah.
And they kept that. Somebody kept logging on and kept that up until about a month ago. It finally fell. But so technically, that was the last Shadow Clan guy. Even though he didn't play, he did his job for almost 20 years.
Oh my God! So it fell on the original servers.
Yeah, I read about it just a little while ago on the Discord channel.
Oh, okay, okay.
But part of me is like, you could see that as sad, but it's good. That space now could be available if people even play OSI anymore to make a new thing.
Correct. And I say that all the time about, like, sometimes I think it's safe to say currently we're the biggest clan, right?
Absolutely.
But we're not the only clan. There's a couple of other active ones, and they have their own RP, they have their own history, and we don't own and we may be the biggest no, Sir probably is up there with members, probably more than us. Path probably has more members, but we're top 5 for sure, active RP guilds, and like that doesn't mean we own the IP on RP, right? Or how to do it, or what you're supposed to do. So if you're not doing something, if you're not utilizing something, definitely leave it to somebody else who can come in and do something new. It might be awesome, it might suck, but give them the opportunity,
Yeah, and it's changed. And one thing I will say, just to touch on what you pointed there, one thing I love about us, and for those listening, our clan, it hasn't necessarily stayed perfectly static over this time either. And that's one reason that I've always thought Narol did a great job. When we need to pivot, we pivot. We had to make pivots when we came to Outlands because it's different. But when it comes to roleplay, we don't police other guilds. We police ourselves. We can roleplay with you if you don't roleplay. But it's nice that there's space for these other groups, because they obviously, Sir incredibly enriches our experience. Path, when we first came to Outlands, they hunted us mercilessly. I loved it. I mean, there were people who seriously didn't enjoy seeing Path on the screen and like them. I love those brutal wars that they did what they did, because they add to the game as well.
Yeah, it's a fine line that we walk sometimes. For us, it's easier because us dying, most orcs anyways, the number one rule we have is no whining, right? So, and I think when I first joined, that's always been the rule for Bloodrock anyway. Like, dude, you're gonna die. You're gonna get dry looted. You're gonna get res killed by these people. Like, it's gonna happen, and we go through it too. So we definitely don't want to hear about how you went through it. You know what I mean? It's just gonna happen to all of us. But we also, on the other side, we don't take it super personal because that's how we sort of structure ourselves in our guild. But man, you res kill the wrong guy. Oh man, the wrong human. Forget about it, dude. The whole guild's after you.
True, but to me, that's also just hilarious. And I know it could get frustrating, but it's you stirred up the hornet's nest. To me, that's a victory already.
Well,
At
it's going to
least
produce activity, that's for sure, right? And
yeah, it's UO. UO is nothing without the interaction. That's the thing again that I think makes the game so hard to move away from, even after all this time. The ability to do so many different things. The fact that people constantly misinterpret other people's actions and it starts those wars. I love it. I love everything about it.
yeah, yeah,
I'm here for it because if you're in this group, when we used to fight Path down and dirty, the people in the Path group, they're solid guys just like we are. They just have a different perspective. And while we could be reasonable about it, it's a lot more fun to just get in game and murder each other and laugh about it afterwards.
yeah. And sometimes, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes, you do take it a little bit personal, if you will. I'm not super bad about it, but there's been times where I'm like, really, dude. But in hindsight, you look at it and I always just remind myself these are just pixels, bro. Like I have and I'm gonna repeat it here just because I need it to be thrown out everywhere possible. We need a banned test server, okay? At the test center, like just delete it, bro. I'm done with it. I hate the idea of it. I hate that new items drop or new weapons drop, and 30 minutes in, somebody posts an Excel spreadsheet of all the fucking data points down to the
Yeah.
microsecond of swing speed, and a new aspect drops, and the same day they know exactly what that is shit. I'm like, how do you, people are telling me that lightning is or I'm making this up, or frost is shit, and they never even tried it. They haven't even unlocked it.
Right. Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
you never even explored it, man. You don't even know.
And then,
Well, you do know, but
yeah,
you don't know. You know what I'm saying? You don't know personally, but you read someone else who, someone who wrote
I
a script about whatever, this and that. And it's just like, bro, that's ruining the exploration. They created a whole new part of the game for you to go explore and learn about, and it's not, you won't even do it because someone already did it, and it's been deemed bad.
yeah, I think that's a trend in games to always look for the whatever the OP thing is, and then of course it remains that way until somebody does get brave and tries a different one and it works, and then suddenly that's the way to go, or there's a patch that changes everything. But if I guess if people want to be that way, that's fine. I will never be. I mean, I'm a rank elder and I've been around, but I'm probably the dumbest orc on Outlands when it comes to what's going on, rule patch wise and rule wise. I just like to log on and do my part for the clan. As like you said, I'm an older orc now. I'm not the ones in the front, so I'm just here to support the ones in the front.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's part of it, right? That's part of, I think, something we've tapped in our own way. We've stayed true to the original intent of the game, the social interactions that we try to keep in game, the RP that we try to keep growing and changing within the game, right?
Hmm.
These are things that originally made the game fun. When you first logged on, you're walking down the street, you're walking down the road and you meet people. Are these, where am I going? Where does this road lead to? I've never been to this town. I'm gonna run there or whatever. Oh wow, on the way there, look at this cool little river or this dam. These are all great things. Like Outland has so much landscape, bro. Like one of the things I
It
do,
does.
Vish, and I'm sure you've seen it, is I try to host a lot of RP PvP events. I find them to be low hanging fruit for us. I've always seen myself as like, some of the other guys like Bartog and the guys from COS. They're more like real role players, right? In that they actually know what they're doing. I'm more like Pokemon episode role player. Like good guys over here, they need to cross the bridge. There's some bad guys on the bridge. They fight them, and like, yeah, if they win, they go across. If not, then they go back home. Like
I'm
something.
with you,
Yeah,
and
that's my style.
we need both because there's hardcore role players, which I do not necessarily consider myself one. I'm always in character, so maybe somebody would say I am, but I tend to fall with you on that. Like I'm a more of a simple role player. in the
Yeah.
way I do my orc.
And we
Um,
and everybody's always in character. So when Vish is saying that, it would for the listener, he means that that doesn't make him unique. All Bloodrock orcs are always in character.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you'll know the one not in character because he'll be the one that his friends are killing in 3 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. It's the worst thing you can do is break character for us in the game. So no matter what happens, you never speak in English, and you never break character. Uh, those are those. So when he means he's not in a hard. So for the average UO player, you would be a hardcore role player because you're speaking a different language in game and never breaking character. But in our community, he's like me. But
Yeah,
but on the other side, we have some very serious role players who are very good at that, and so it's whatever they enjoy, you know.
yeah, we have room for all that, and the intricate plots that those guys come up with are amazing sometimes. Absolutely amazing. They and and on Outlands and really in servers before, we get sometimes decent seer support for big,
We do, yeah. That's
those
one of
giant
the
battles and quests, and those become amazing memories of things that you just can't see playing the base game.
yeah. I'll give the and actually I'll cue the post production. I'll add the video clip here in our YouTube video, but we did an event where Atropa, the seer Atropa here in Outlands, who's been very helpful. Shout out to Tropa. She helped me. I had an idea. There's a pond right by the Brigands. The Brigands are a brigand outlaw gang that are one of our allies, and they're just west of our fort. And next to their brigand guild house is a pond. Now, this small pond is unique because you can walk in it. Have you ever done this, Vish? You ever walked inside of it?
I think I accidentally did it just like a month ago. I was
Okay, yeah,
shocked.
yeah. You can walk into the and so you're actually underwater, if you will. Of course, the game animation doesn't know that, right? So it looks like you're in a hole or whatever, but it's visually kind of cool because if you go a certain way, you actually break the surface and you go underground, and so you can see the bottom of the lake.
Hmm.
And if you go a little bit north, you go above ground and your head pops out of the water, so that your body's underground. So visually, it looks you can get both of those angles. And so I was playing with it, and this is I didn't discover it; it's a known thing. But I was like, how can I make this in a fucking RPP event? I have to, you know what I mean? This is so cool. So then I came up with this story. I was like, okay, well, it's a lake, right? What do I do? Well, you would fish in a lake. And so I wrote a story up and I used AI art to generate images of orcs fishing and stuff. And I made up a story that there's a magical golden fish that like grants wishes or some shit. I forget what I said. Something like it's a rare super magical fish. And the humans and the bad guys have been searching all over Avedon for it, right? And at one point, and this starts my event, a orc and a human find themselves fishing at the same lake across from each other, and they curse each other out. They talk or whatever, and then suddenly a fish jumps, right? And so they go back, they call their friends, and then a fight ensues. They're talking back and forth. They all see the magical golden fish and they jump in the pond. And so we all run in the pond and then we have a brawl in that little ass pond, right? That was my idea. So, long story short, I tell Atropa, and she was like, "Yeah, I got you." So, man, she made it to where when I wanted to, I triggered it, and a magical fish came out that spawned like magical visuals, and he was like a yellow fish was hopping around and jumping in the air, and everybody was like, "Oh shit," you know. So, anyways, if the viewers and you can watch it here on YouTube, but it's a great example of how we get support to do these things, but really, it's our job to give them a reason to, right? You need to justify. I mean, I tell Atropa like, "Hey, look, I got 14 people interested. I'm expecting probably 20 to arrive at the event." And so she could be like, okay, this is something that's for the community. It isn't just Xu'rek wanting shit, right? It's for
Right.
it's for others.
Yeah, the seers they have on Outlands are great. They have been with them on previous servers as well. So I think they add a lot. They add a lot. And what you're saying is right though. You got to bring it to them. It's got to be for the community. It's got to be something that obviously doesn't take too much time as they're real people. Um, like our Halloween event is an amazing thing, and we often get a little help changing the look of the fort for the humans to defend against our orc zombie attacks. Um, So yeah, I
Different
second your
things.
shout out.
Well, I got a question for you, Vish. I'm curious. So you're an old time orc, and a lot of listeners are probably old time players too, whether partially or fully old time players. They remember those days. You still kind of play the game, and I hope you don't take this in the wrong way, but you still kind of play the game in an old school sort of way, in that we're all talking about the latest build. What's the best build for boating? What's the best build for bosses versus farming, solo farming versus group farming? You don't really ever engage in any of those conversations. Your play style is more chill. Uh, could you explain kind of? I think you just mostly just chop trees now. Is that fair to
I
say?
mean, it is. So, I came to Outlands, whatever the Blood Rock clan moved, I moved. So we went through several servers as they came and go, and then when Outlands came, I followed because that's what we do, and we always need resource gatherers to start. So I had one of those, and that's my brother, if you will, Tarshak, and then and we fought in the area. But to be honest, in the beginning, Outlands was just there's so much there, man, and it is amazing actually. But at the time, it was just a lot. So I just resound that Vish is going to continue to be the same Vish he's been on every other server, and my skill set, although I did add an echo, eventually, is it's just his same skill set he's always been for 15 years. So there's situations that are very troublesome for me. And when we would slaughter moon and run through the dungeons, I'm not scared of the players. They're not so scary, but it's that little skeletal mage that you guys mock that's gonna be the end of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I just still like to play that way. It's harder here, but Vish will hang around the fort. If you see him, I'm either out with the clan because we're doing a consistent thing, or I'm just patrolling and guarding the borders. For Tar, you're right. I mostly log on. I mine. I chop trees. I do take breaks, but I did finally hit 120 mining, which to me that was winning the game.
Yeah, you won, dude. Congrats. You can log off now.
I didn't uninstall when it was over like I thought I would, but there's a certain calm, and sometimes you can have a little show on or something to getting on and just gathering the resources. And on Outlands, it's actually as profitable as well. I guess that's the difference. So it's not like it's not like I'm wasting time. You're doing something the clan needs. It still benefits my guy. It's relaxing.
Yeah.
I'm there. The main key is that, and what started with me is I could be chopping trees or mining and have tracking up, and when I see a name, then I can log Vishon instead and defend the fort. Just a little more, or he's already logged on in the second account, just sitting in the stronghold.
Yeah, yeah.
Because obviously, if you patrol, you end up just standing at the wall a lot. We do get a lot of activity, but
We get
there's
quite a
there's
bit.
yeah, but there's
You said something which I want to touch on really quickly is, you still play the game like you did 15, 20 years ago, and there's something about that because you've been in some of the events I've made, and I'm not the only one who makes events, so other events too. But when we have a fun event like that where we're not earning any gold, we're not earning any prestige, we're not leveling a single fucking EXP point, right, or a codex or a rare loot chance. There's none of that. We're not getting any in-game benefits except the pure RP stuff. Those voice chats and the people laughing and people just having and the aftermath, and when we post in our Discord the screenshots, those are going to be what we remember 20 years from now when I'm myself, I'm 37. When I'm fucking 57, 60 years old and I look back at UO, I won't give a shit about the rare loot that I got. None of that really will matter. And the thing is, we know that, right? Like you know that now that's not going to be what matters. So it's something I commend you for, because you try to, when you can, you play the game how you want, you participate and do what's helpful with the orcs. And I think those memories are going to be what we remember 20 years from now. Now, somebody may disagree, and there's nothing wrong with playing the game however you want to play. You can play it, there's different ways to enjoy the game. We're just a like-minded group of people that enjoy it that way and value those moments over the pixels in game. Which, that's not to say we don't care about the pixels in game. We do care about them. They're just never our priority.
Right. The pixels open up doors for you to do new and interesting things as well. There's not like there's no value to having that stuff. We like decorating our stronghold to get the right feel we want. If nobody participated in that stuff, we wouldn't be able to do that. So
Yeah.
there's a place for all that. But I agree. The funny memories, that's why the best thing about the Orc clan is the other orcs in it. We got a lot of guys that are just, whether they're trying to be or not, often hilarious. And and really, for those listening, a lot of the hilarity comes from our new people that have no idea what's going on. And they might feel confused, but what they're really doing is they're almost creating an event by doing things incorrectly.
Yeah,
There's no such thing as doing things incorrectly, actually. It's just
there's
more
not.
hilarity.
Other than breaking character and speaking English, there's really nothing
Well,
you can do wrong, because it's like an ecosystem in and of itself, right? The snots don't know what they're doing. The grunts have to correct them. That grants them their leadership position because they know the answers. So it reaffirms their status in the clan, right? The leadership gets to see grunts as fulfilling their role. It's a great system we got going on, and yeah, no, Vish, it's I think you play a critical role in it, man. So I'm very glad to hear your kind of background there. But I do want to ask you one final question here, okay? And this is kind of a big one, so if you want, I'm curious what your thoughts are. But in Outlands now, for what you know of it anyway, what's your biggest gripe? What's your biggest thing that you can change if you could snap your fingers and have it? What would you want Outlands to change or modify or introduce?
okay, so they'll never do this, but get rid of those stupid murder fees. For someone like me, who again, I don't go to dungeons. I ran through them on Slaughter Moon. I didn't really look around very much. Ironically, I just decided I would do some PVM about 3 weeks before they did the monster patch, and now everything is too tough for me already. So I've kind of abandoned it. But I just want to play the game like I did and kill people and stuff. But if I don't kill them in a neutral area and then I die, suddenly I owe 50,000 gold, which is nothing to the people that really play. But for me, the character Vish has no way to earn that money. I haven't even attacked a Mongbat in 2 years. I don't know how tough that would be for him because he has no aspect or anything. But to me, that's the most limiting because I kill people all the time when there's stuff going on, and people tend to give counts. Fortunately, crafters make money here, and I can transfer money and res them. But I know they do the things they do for the reasons they do them. But our slaughter moons,
They're a net negative.
Great time.
I-
They are.
Yeah,
We
they're-
can't even really do them anymore like we did. With you die in a dungeon, you can't fight there for 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm not saying those aren't that Outlands didn't need or that wasn't a net plus to add those restrictions. But if you're asking me, and I can be greedy now, and I could change Outlands,
Yeah.
I'm removing all that.
How
I'm
about
going
this?
back to where.
Would you settle for a res fee that is a proportionate amount of all the gold you have on all three of your accounts within one master account, within one account?
I would. but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
'cause I'm
So they
always
take all the gold
yeah.
available on every character that you own, and they base the fee on that to where the highest is what it is now, and it can go down to as low as 100 gold if you have basically nothing.
I would take it because, again, for those who aren't that familiar with our clan that might be listening, most of my gold gets donated to the clan anyway. I don't really have a need for it. I have my huts, which 2 of those are clan huts anyway, and so the gold, Vish is the only reason they get gold is to throw it in a pile on the floor. But they, I would love that change, and I would just, I miss the slaughter moons, and we change. We change periodically, right? We get new leadership like we did recently. Things will change a little.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. And I'm down for whatever it is. But there's definitely the days of me solo stalking dungeons, killing people because that's how I earn my money. That's probably, I haven't done that in a long time. I don't know how that would play out. I think the spawn would just murder me.
Yeah, probably would, man. But hey, Vish, I'm confident as you have since '98, as you have since 2000, you'll find a way to be who you need to be. You know, which is what you do now. So, Vishakt, thank you, man. I really appreciated it. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about you. You're one of the oldest orcs, I think, officially. That's why you're an elder, man. So thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's been fun.
Hey, have a good one. Googie.
You too. Good gig.